Hi, Allan.
How are you, Russ?
Doing good. We're going to have some fun today. This has actually been in the works for a couple of years, if you remember. We've been talking about doing this. Anyway, this is on the philosophy of compensation. It's not about the nuts and bolts. It's not about formulas. It's really about what's the philosophy and how do you move your firm forward with compensation. I'm here today with Allan Koltin. I think this is our fourth interview, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just introduce Allan for a moment here. Allan, to the accounting industry, everybody knows him, but this discussion is beyond the accounting industry. It really designed to apply to professional service firms in general. Allan is the second most influential person in the accounting profession. He's been voted that for several years now. He's formerly a senior partner at a top 15 accounting firm. He's an advisor to the accounting profession, other professional service firms, and private equity. And he's been a consultant on compensation and other firm-related matters for 4 decades now. I'm Russell Shapiro. I'm a partner at Levenfeld Pearlstein. I'm a lawyer. We do a lot of work in the professional service firm area. I also was on and chair of our compensation committee for a long time. So this stuff's of personal interest, and hopefully it'll be timely now.
So let me add to your background a little, because you're so damn humble. You and your team have built one of the top law firms in the country in the space of helping accounting firms and private equity and other professional and financial service companies. So let's not leave that little piece out. It's been absolutely amazing what Levenfeld Pearlstein has done under your direction and leadership.
Thank you, Allan. Yeah. So the title of this is Koltin on Compensation, a philosophical guide for professional service firms. Well, let's start off with the first question, which is sort of a big picture question. How does compensation affect, influenced by culture, accountability, and long-term strategy? I will say, where do you start? Do you start with culture, or do you start with compensation? Do you start with strategy? Sorry, I'm just sort of elaborating on the question.
Love it. So compensation to me is the heart of the body. However, before we get there, there's some parts that need to be aligned. The first one for any group of business owners is, what are we trying to build? What are we trying to achieve? The second is we call it the rules of order. What is going to be the accountability for committing to what each of us is going to do? As you know, there's 2 A's in business. There's the left goalpost, which is accountability. Do what you say you're going to do. And there's the right goalpost, which is autonomy. Leave me alone. I'll do what I want when I want to do. You and I both know, as leaders of professional services firms, the more accountable, goal-driven firms always outperform the highly autonomous firms. So we have to first figure out the strategy. Then we have to do a gut check of what's realistic. Because we could have a strategy to go climb that mountain, but if we don't have the players, if we don't have the talent, we're just kidding ourselves. It's a exercise in futility. It'll never happen. So what do we want to achieve? Do we have the assets, the resources to go do it? What's the culture going to be? Are we going to be one firm? Or are we going to be a sort of confederation of a lot of firms that all do our own thing, and the only thing we share is certain operating expenses and a brand name? It's getting all of that out. Then it's coming to compensation, saying compensation will be the reward and behavior program for achieving the strategic goals, the cultural goals, the accountability of getting from step A to step B.
Thank you. Let's just posit there's different types of partners in a firm. I want to talk about how you might compensate them differently, or how you may give them goals and how you might compensate them on that goals. So there's line partners that sort of do the work, make sure the work gets done. There's sort of real leaders that are focusing a lot of their time on building the business and strategy and leadership. And there's sort of partners in the middle that are driving business, have some leadership elements to their job. How do you sort of, some firms will be like, well, we're just going to look at people's numbers. Maybe not for the managing partner, but for others. Other firms are more subjective. So how do you sort of differentiate partners from each other and how you compensate them?
So let me start by talking about firm size, because I think firm size matters. The advice that you and me would give to a firm that's 1 to 7 million probably is a bit different than one that's 12 to 30 million, and for sure vastly different from a firm 40 million and above. So I think the question that you need to answer early on is, do we want to build a firm that is sustainable? And do we want to put the firm before any individual partner? Most firms we work with that are 1 to 10 million, no disrespect to them, it's just the way we go, is a little bit of an eat what you kill, right? Eat what you kill means we're going to look at the end of the year how many billable hours you had, how much new business you brought in, and what was the size of the book of business you managed. At some point, as you know, that breaks. The formulaic approach breaks, and we get religion. We talk about moving to a more holistic approach where we sit around the table and we say, just like a football team has players in different positions because of their skill set, and actually meets after every play to huddle to determine the next play, right? We're going to move to that. So in the jungle, as we call it, I guess there's 3 things you can do. You can find, mine, and grind, right? You can be a business getter, you can be a client handler, or you can be a technician. Most firms in what we'll call a $1 to $10 million firm, to use a baseball analogy, we're 5 tool players. We do a little bit of everything. I think when you get to 10 million to 25 million, you go through what we call adolescence. You begin to break the old mold and now realize that to grow the business to the next level, we're going to have to figure out what position on the football team you're best skilled to play, and we're going to set goals for you specific to those things, right? So,
And how do you then measure relative compensation with those different roles?
yeah, you have to have a meeting. Many meetings we've had with firms. In the old days, we used a flip chart. Now we use a whiteboard. But we used to write 4 words on the board. And the words were, what is the most valuable thing a partner can do, right? And what we're...
That partner or a partner.
A partner.
A partner.
Bring in business. Serve clients. Technical expertise. Firm management.
And could
Grow
that change
people.
over time?
It does. It does. I think the revelation we all go through at one point is there is not an answer to that question that's the same for every partner. The best question is for individual partners, what's your skill? What's your passion? And how does that channel into what we're trying to achieve in the big picture of growing a firm? You've used the term many times, highest and best used. But it comes back to culture, Russ, because if the culture is leave me alone, I'm a partner, I'm sort of like a tenured professor at a university, you can't touch me. How do you build off of that when a partner wants to do whatever they want to do? I think great firms, when it comes to partner compensation, we call it flexibility within a framework. You have the autonomy to do your thing, but we can't lose touch of your skill set and what we need you to do to perform for the team to help the team achieve the overall goal. Many firms have broken up over this discussion. This is not what I signed up for. And as you know, there's many firms that look like a big firm, but they're really a bunch of sole practitioners sharing space and sharing a brand name.
And there's the opposite. Small firms are operating like one firm.
Yes, yes.
And that often defines profitability.
Yeah. Yeah, there are, we call them graduation days. We ask the question, usually in a strategic planning session, do we even want to go to the next level? And everybody always raises their hand. But when we start talking about the sacrifice and the change and maybe the risk, that's the moment of truth. Are we willing to take the next leap, or do we just want to sort of milk what we have?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How do you feel about a portion of a partner's compensation that should be guaranteed versus at risk?
Remember the scene from Rocky? The manager says, you need a manager,
Yeah.
but he also talks about the eye of the tiger. I find, in general, when most of the compensation is guaranteed up front, we don't give that extra 10%. I think you have to keep a hunger in your performers. My suggestion typically is let's project what we think we'll make next year, and let's allocate half of it, 50%. We don't want you losing sleep at night, worried about paying the mortgage or the kids' education or whatever it might be. We want you to have security up to a point, but we also want you to have that eye of the tiger, to give that extra 10%. People always say to me, I give it. I go, no. There's an X factor that we want in play, and I think a big bonus pool tied to specific goals for you individually, tied somewhat to your overall team and department, maybe tied to your geography if that matters, and then the overall achievement of firm goals has to be top of mind.
So you're saying you think if someone is, pegged to make $1 million, to use a round number, half should be at risk on those other factors?
Yeah, I mean, there's always exceptions. There's exceptions sometimes where the number that they would get, they can't live on. So, we do an inter-account loan. We don't want anybody leaving the firm. We don't want anybody so stressed out that they can't focus on business. But in general terms, I think a healthy starting point is 50-50, 50 guaranteed and 50 at risk. Now, if we're coming off a formulaic approach where what you kill, you eat, and you're pretty much getting 100% of it because you control it, maybe you phase into getting to 50-50.
Okay.
Sometimes firms will start at 70-30 and then 60-40.
All right. Thank you. Let's talk about the major leadership roles. Okay, someone is the managing partner, and they're devoting half of more of their time to the firm. Someone is a department chair, they're devoting 25 to 30 or 40% of their time to that role. How do you think about them, and how do you think about their compensation relative to other people? And because it's just hard to measure. Yes, you could see what their department did that year, but maybe it was a down year in their industry. Okay, but they're doing all the right things. So can you talk a little bit about that?
So the first thing we have to acknowledge is how we compensate leaders and people for leadership and management roles is completely different. When you're compensating a producer, there's a couple metrics I can look at right away and get my hands around 95% of what to pay them. How much business did they originate? How was their chargeable hours? What was their realization? What's their book of business managed? Leadership, unfortunately, doesn't lend to those kinds of metrics. So if I'm evaluating a leader, here's some of the things, and feel free to pine in. First thing I'm looking at is, their organic growth. Are they growing a business? Especially if they're sitting in the CEO position. Is that growth profitable? Are they active in mergers and acquisitions? Are those successful? Are they active in, we call them surgical strikes, lifting talent, the war for talent? Maybe the most important is with the team we have, are people reaching their potential, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's a people business. Great leaders have an environment where people thrive. Do we have happy clients? That's easy to measure. Do we have happy people? That's easy to measure. The hard ones are we building a sustainable firm or business line? Are we creating a firm of the future? You know, the telltale always is the investment in innovation versus profitability. I talk to partners and I ask them, are you happy at the firm? And they say, yeah. And I said, well, how do you measure the success of your leaders? I said, well, I made more money this year. What does that have to do with it, right? You know and I know that we could stop all strategic investments in innovation and show our partners a pathway to make more income in the short term, but in the long term, we're going to die. So what you really need is a culture of believing that the leader has the right, has the responsibility to build a business. And at some firms it exists and at other firms it doesn't. But make no mistake about it, measuring leadership can't be done in any one year. We have to look at the body of work over a 3, 5, sometimes 10-year period. Very different than how a service line partner is compensated. Right?
Those are good points, Allan. We talked a little bit, we touched on sort of who decides. Let's say you have this partner who's 40 years old, getting a lot of business. Firm sort of thinks that this person should be in leadership. The person says, no, I'd rather build this business. I think I could make more building this business. I think that's where my talent is. How do you deal with that? What should the firm do? Do they get punished for that? Is that okay? We've had this situation a couple of times.
Yeah. I think you have to let people breathe. I think you can challenge them up to a point. In the example you're giving, I'm assuming that that individual must have the potential to be a great leader. Otherwise, we wouldn't plant that seed. And for a variety of reason, they just want to keep their day job. I'm okay with that. Last thing we ever want to do is set somebody up for failure. Because more times than not, they're going to be the first one to say, I told you so. You just didn't listen. So if a person wants to stay as a production partner and have a big book of business, you know, if they could help to grow people, and usually they need to do that because at some point the book gets too big for them, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Private equity has really come into the accounting business in particular, but a lot of other businesses, wealth management, other places. I want to talk to you a little bit about whether compensation, how compensation is different in the private equity model, because most of our audience is accounting firms at this point, and the industry is in somewhat of a transition where this new form of capital has come into play. And in the traditional partnership model, you sort of put your percentages, set your percentages, and you divide the money, and maybe there's a bonus pool, sort of like we talked about. PE has introduced equity, okay, in a way that they have more of a long-term rather than a short-term implications. And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some specific questions I have on what's different for private equity. How do those firms need to think about things differently? How should private equity firms think about it? So with that introduction, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions.
Yep.
One, there's something we call the scrape. When somebody, when a PE firm invests money in a firm, partners, at least some partners, lower their compensation, and that's part of what creates the value, and they get paid that amount at the closing of a transaction. So someone might be making $1 million a year, say, you know what, I'll take 750, multiply that 250 by 10, and give me $2.5 million. Okay, that's just by way of background. How does the scrape in the initial deal fit into the compensation equation going forward?
So, Russ, you just set a record. You've asked 5 questions in one
We're
question.
not supposed to do that.
No. So I'm going to go on recall, which isn't great, but I'm going to just share some things as we really talk about the scrape of partner comp in private equity. So some things I've now seen after 3.5 years. Number one is partners in CPA firms measure success by the increase in their compensation year over year. We all acknowledge our business isn't worth anything, right? That's how this has worked until July 1 of 21. Private equity came in and totally disrupted our business and said, oh no, it's worth a lot more, and we're going to show you how it can be worth a lot more today and in 5 years and in 20 years. So the first question I ask partners before we talk about the scrape is, do you want to stay as a cash player, measuring your success on comp? Or do you want to do what your clients do, where they make a nice living, but it's the equity that they're building? And you don't always get the same answer from everyone. Number two, in over 100,000 hours of consulting to accounting firms, a lot on partner comp, you begin to see things. What I observe is the following. In most firms, to keep the family happy, the upper third of the performers is subsidizing the bottom third of the performers. This is a phenomenon that goes on in lots and lots of places, partially because we're in a talent war. I find in the PE world that upper third is actually uber rewarded for what they do, and it actually pushes them to deliver even more. What did Thomas Jefferson once say about partner and partner comp? He said, there's nothing more unequal than the equal treatment of unequal partners. Private equity pulls that piece out, and it's a new day. So when I'm talking to somebody about how much to reduce, they ask me the question, being an accountant, well, what will I get paid back? And there's not a universal answer. I mean, I've seen some firms where they have an actual grid. For every dollar you get 3 or 4 times that back at closing as cash with capital gain. And to some, that's, I'll put as much as I can. And to others, they say it's not worth it. If you told me the multiple was 6 or 7 times the money I'm scraping or reducing, now you've got my attention. Mm-hmm. So what I find when we do the grid of partner comp going forward and what to scrape, think 16-column worksheet. Think, here's the partner. Are they an A, B, or C player? That's important. You know, what have they done to make this business successful? Number 2, what's their age? How long do they want to work? And how hard do they want to go? Those are 2 different things, right? Because private equity is thinking about retention of young talent. And they want to disproportionately give that rollover equity to the younger. The younger you are, the more you're going to be here for the longer time. But they also have an eye on who's the A players, the B players, and C players. So it's a complex grid. There is no one right way to do it. And the best way to do it is just jump in and start to move pieces around.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's talk about compensation going forward, not the scrape anymore.
Yeah.
Should partners in PE-backed firms expect less cash compensation overall? Can you speak to that?
Yeah. I mean, you know, there's no free lunch in this business. If you're getting a valuation of 1.5 to 2 times, whatever the number is, the revenues of your firm, I know it doesn't work like that, but that's
Right.
trying to make it simple.
Right.
There must be something that they're buying. A piece of what they're buying is a piece of your compensation. They're buying a piece of that forever. I call it excess profitability beyond what the partner makes for the production that they deliver to the firm. You're selling that. So going forward, some will say we're going to freeze your comp for 3 years. Some will say we're going to reduce your comp and freeze it for a couple of years. But what I've observed in firms that are 5 and 10 and 15 years into the private equity world is for the super high performer, they found a way to grow their comp back. Why? Because think about it. Think about after the first flip, 5 years later, if you want to keep those people incentivized, you have to not only provide new rollover equity, you have to continue to grow their comp.
Let's take an income partner at the time of the deal making $400,000 a year.
Yep.
Now their comp isn't going to be impacted, at least initially. Okay. What does their future look like in terms of cash compensation, equity incentives, bonuses? How is their world different from what they used to think they were going to get, which is I become a partner and I slowly make more money?
Well, this is one that depends, because at some firms, they have different classes of rollover equity. Class A goes to existing equity partners. Class B goes to income partners. Class C goes to anybody else in the organization who's talented that they want to keep. And Class D is to go steal a star from another firm. So if it were a firm with 20 equity partners, the day after the deal, you may have 100 equity partners. Equity, a piece of the rock, is now forever redefined. I've seen examples in deals, one of the first PE deals that happened with an accounting firm, the partners did what we call reverse EBITDA. They said, we're going to actually give big raises to our income partners so that they're not flight risk and they feel good about it, because at this moment, we're not giving them the kind of equity that the equity partners are getting. I've seen other partners make a statement and say, you had that deferred comp program for income partners. You get 1 times your compensation. You're not going to get a penny until you're age 65. You're 35 now. I'm going to present value that number and fully vest you. Here's a check. Here's a check for $500,000. Oh, and here's a stock sheet. We're going to give you a form of rollover equity in the deal. And that income partner is looking like, oh my God, I just won the lottery. Is this for real? So the wisdom of firms have been, figure out who your talent is and put economic incentives, whether we call it ownership units, stock, options, management incentive units, profit participation shares. I mean, there's a whole dictionary of terms, but it's a game changer. Many, many, many people in the firm today now have an equity incentive.
Can a firm do this on their own without getting private equity money?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We saw a BDO do a ESOP. And, if you talk to their CEO, Wayne Burson, this was all about looking at the future. He and his leadership team believed that people today, especially in their 20s, 30s, early 40s, they're not waiting till age 65. And if you don't give them a piece of the rock, guess what? Someone else will. But I've seen firms that'll never do an ESOP and never do private equity. And what they've figured out is a different way to incentivize people. Move them through the system extra fast. Give them disproportionate raises and bonuses. Let them know that when they become an equity partner, there's a substantial reward at the end as well. So there's no one right way to do this. Every firm stands on their own. If you sort of dummy this down, Russ, if you think about it, it's not an accounting firm, it's not a law firm, it's not an engineering firm. It's a people business. And the group that can recruit, retain, and grow talent generation after generation, and set a plan and have people commit to the plan with their highest and best use of time, decade over decade after decade, that's the firm that thrives.
It's excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let me go into now what I'm calling our lightning round.
Yeah.
These are going to be more specific and quicker questions.
Good. Does that mean I should give quicker answers too?
Yeah, that's the implication there. Should there be any relationship between a partner's contributed capital and their earnings?
You would think there should be, but if we did a graph of what exists, it's all over the place.
Yeah.
There are some firms where they say, if you want to be an equity partner, you're going to give 1 times your annual earnings of contributed capital. And income partners, which by definition shouldn't have any skin in the game, I've seen firms that have gone to the income partners and said, you're going to make a $10,000, $20,000, $25,000 equity contribution as well. I've also seen the other end of the food chain where firms just don't need a lot of capital. They don't make a lot of decisions. They don't make a lot of investments. Or if they do, they lean heavily into bank debt. But it's not a highly capitalized firm. And then there's the hybrid of maybe something in the middle where 30% of your annual earnings is left behind as capital. And then you have a whole spectrum and range of if you leave the capital.
Do you have a recommendation?
I don't. I think it gets back to all those pillars we talked about, what you're trying to achieve, what the culture is, what's your tolerance for risk, right? All those different kind of factors. And then, there's a whole range of the capital you have. Do you get a couple percent over prime? I'm aware of firms that pay 10%, 12% on that accrual-based capital. Their thinking is, hey, one bad audit, one bad...
So there's no right or... I'm sorry for talking.
Yeah.
There's no right or wrong. It depends on the culture and the goals.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
What do you think about having a highest to lowest ratio? Like I've heard firms say, well, I don't want the highest person to be more than 5 times the lowest person. I'm talking about equity partners now. Do you have a philosophy on that?
I'm laughing because one of the first partner comp projects I had, which was well before the internet, big firm in New Jersey. I remember getting there for individual partner interviews. And the first partner said, thank God you're here. You'll bring some democracy back to the table. And I said, what does that mean? He said, well, I'm aware of partners in our firm that are making 4 times what I'm making. Shouldn't all partners essentially make the same? I went on to the next meeting, and it happened to be the one that was the highest paid partner in the firm, and said, I'm not getting compensated enough. I think the ratio should be 10 to 1. Over the years, depending who I talk to, I've seen firms, are you ready for this, where the ratio has been, and I'm giving an extreme example, 40 to 1. I've seen 20 to 1. I've seen 10 to 1. And, on its surface, people say to me, how can that be? It feels like the higher paid are ripping off the underpaid. And you know what I use? I come back to professional athletes. Why does one player on a team make $30 million a year and another player make $3 million a year? It's because of the skill set and what we can't achieve if we don't have that player on the team. And I would tell you that in the world of public accounting and CEOs and leaders, and someone that works on CEO compensation, I've seen that dynamic. I've seen CEOs that are worth 10, maybe 20 times what the average partner income is. And I've seen some where, they're sort of there for 4 years. It's like rented space. And then they're going to move on to some other role. And had they never been at the firm probably would have been in the same place. Alternatively, I've seen these, I call them X Factor CEOs, that if they had not been at that firm would have never, ever achieved anything close to what they're achieving. This is the art of partner compensation. It's not a science.
But to the question, you're saying there shouldn't be a limit.
No limit at all.
Okay. Let's say a younger partner inherits a book of business from an older partner. How long should that person ever make what the older partner got who built it? Should they not make as much? Should it be over a time period? How do you think about someone's gave somebody else over time $3 million of business, and then retired. How does their relative compensation compare and sort of what time periods?
Yeah. I equate it to gifting or inheritance. We're gifting this book of business to you because you've shown skill sets that we believe will allow you to be successful maintaining, but more importantly, growing the book of business. Should your compensation go up on day one just because of this gift? I'm not sure it should move that much. You are taking on a greater responsibility. And for that and the hope and investment in you, I'll pay some more comp. But if you think you're going to be making what the person was making that had that book of business, not going to happen. Ultimately, if you grow that business and take it to another level, you'll be worth what that other partner was, but not on day one.
Okay, and so a follow-up question was, how do you compare someone that inherited their book of business or someone that built their book of business but had the same amount? I think you've just answered that question.
Yeah. The one that inherited it absolutely is not worth on day one. The one that built it was sort of self-made, if I can say that. Yeah.
How do you handle an income partner that's outperforming an equity partner?
Very delicately. I get these calls from compensation committees where they say we have a problem. We have a couple income partners outperforming equity partners, and equity partners are sort of saying, over my dead body, they're not going to make more money than me. And the income partners are saying, why not? And I have a very simple answer to this. It's okay for income partners to make more money than equity partners. Equity is a form of ownership, not performance. And what I always end up telling these people is, here's your choice. You can choose not to pay those very talented income partners more than the equity partners, but know that the consequences are that someone else will. Nothing worse than not paying somebody for their value, causing them to go to the market and find out that someone else loves them more. They will leave. Business isn't fair. Why does the newbie coming in get paid more than the incumbent? It's because a belief system, in the legal profession, look at Kirkland and Ellis, one of America's most successful law firms, most profitable firms. How did they do it? They stole stars. Go talk to Jeff Hamas, the guy that built it, the former CEO and chairman of Kirkland. He went out and took risks on people. I once asked him, I said, let me get this straight. You go into these other firms and you say to the partner, you're making this, it's a seniority-based compensation program, so you're never going to pass all those people, but you're outperforming them today. Does that bother you? Hell yeah, it bothers me. Come join us. I can't pay you that. You're here, but I'm going to take a risk and pay you this. And I said, well, my gosh, your firm could go bankrupt if these people talk a good game and don't deliver. You know what his math was? He says, superstars will never let you down. For every 10 they brought in, 7 hit the ball out of the park, 2 got some singles, and 1 they guessed wrong on. That's how you build an organization. You take real risk. And you got to be willing to pay those income partners whatever they're worth, or someone else will.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Should seniority at all be a factor in compensation?
Russ, it's a question that is one for the ages. Does years of service to an institution matter? And my simple answer to it is, it depends on what you've done. If all you've done has sort of been and I don't mean this in any negative way, a client service partner. You had clients brought to you, you did the work, you did quality work, you billed, you collected it. We're paying you a fair compensation already for doing that. But what about the partner that continuously brings in business, doesn't hoard it, feeds everyone else in the jungle, and then wakes up the next morning and takes a greater risk and goes back and tries to get more and keeps bringing the food to feed the family. I don't know about you, but in the spectrum of risk, that's the highest risk. It's the hardest asset to find in the market. And for that, I'm going to pay that person a lot of money. I think the only thing maybe more valuable is, as we talked about, X Factor CEOs. So I don't know if that answers the question.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Let's talk about open or closed compensation systems. I know your view on this, and I want you to articulate it, and I think I might challenge you for a moment.
Fantastic. So my stated opinion is open compensation is great for consultants like me because it causes tremendous chaos and allows us to have many, many billable hours putting out fights and putting out fires. 1986, I remember Erwin Friedman, the founder of our firm, stopping me in the hallway and saying, Allan, it's a big day for you because you finally hit your number. My number was $100,000. That was winning the Illinois lottery. And as soon as he said it to me, I saw he had a sheet of paper with other names on it. And I saw out of the corner of my eye that two other partners, one named Lenny and one named Richard, were making $2,000 and $3,000 more than me. And I thought I was better than them. So rather than say thank you, you know what I said? I said I couldn't help but notice the spreadsheet. How come they're making more? The single most divisive element of an open partner compensation system is relative partner income. Because there will always be somebody making a little bit more than you, and it could be $1,000 and it will drive you crazy. As a firm gets bigger, closed compensation or quasi-closed, closed is all you know is what you make and maybe what the average of the firm is. Quasi-closed is maybe you have different quadrants. And, the leader can say, look, you're at the high end of quadrant 2, to which I can say, how do I get to the low end of quadrant 1? What are the things I need to do? I'm okay with that. But open compensation, and I'm talking more about firms that are 10 to 15 million of revenue and more. I think when you're $1 million to $10 million, it's a start.
Right. I'm talking about bigger firms. Let me give you an argument of our former managing partner who was in favor of an open system. You know who he is.
Yes.
It's actually our first managing partner. He said, okay, I know people are going to be pissed off. I want them to be pissed off. I want to explain to them exactly why this person is making more than he is. Okay? And I want them to realize why and, adjust his or her behavior if he wants. How do you respond to that argument?
It's a great argument. It's balancing the output of two distinct ways to approach it. I would guess that while that could be an economic incentive, I, as the leader, think I can find a way to say to a partner, here's what you're making for what you're delivering. Do you want to make more? Absolutely. Well, let's talk about what you need to do. It's an individual contract, partner and leader, of what you have to achieve to do that. I'm able to do that without sharing what anybody else makes. They know the average. Sometimes someone will say to me, I was really happy with my number until I saw the average and found out I'm not average. Now I feel terrible about myself. Averages, as you know, can be deceiving. What is average defined as? It's the meeting point of the best of the worst with the worst of the best. It's a number. Numbers can be deceiving. Don't get hung up on that. So it's a management style. For your managing partner at that time with the culture of the firm, it sounds like it worked well. There is not one way to do this, but I will tell you as you get bigger and you now have to go steal stars from other firms and you have to pay real money to get them in the door, you flash that on a spreadsheet to every partner in the firm and good luck with that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let me ask you how you recommend firms handle high-performing partners in a bad year.
Yeah. So
Do you protect them? Do they ride with the group?
yeah, a bad year for that partner or a bad year for the firm?
For the firm.
Yeah. This is going to be a little bit of an exaggerated answer, but the day you stop paying high performers for performance is the day you got problems, because they're going to take that foot off the accelerator and knowingly or unknowingly they're going to lighten up a little bit, because they're saying, killing myself to achieve that goal, the reward's no longer there. Now, all that being said, they're not a sole practitioner. They're part of a firm, and it is firm first. So if this is what I would have paid the high performer and we're having a crappy year, am I saying to them, you're getting nothing just like the rest of us? No. I'm going to pay them something, even if I have to go to the bank and borrow the money, because I need to send that message that no matter what, your performance matters, and you need to keep that foot on the accelerator as hard as you had it. Otherwise, I think you run a risk. But understand, you are part of a firm. The firm did terrible this year. You did great. I'm doing the best. And you know what? Partner comp is not about any one year. It's about a series of consecutive years. Implied in that is someday you'll get yours back. Hang with me. Trust me. I've never let you down before. Won't let you down in the future.
Alan, thank you. That's great. Do you have anything else you want to cover?
In the world of partner comp, the statement I would make is it oftentimes defines a firm, the culture, what we achieve, and you have to be open and have the willingness to look at it every year, because as the firm changes, partner compensation evolves and has to change. Sometimes partners will say, I feel betrayed. Look at the partnership agreement. It says this is how we get paid. Now you're telling me it's a new day? Yes, it's a new day. We have to have the ability to change partner compensation based on the goals of what we want to achieve next year and based on the goals of what we want to achieve over the next 5 years. Partner compensation, remember, it's just a behavioral tool to get the results of the greater plan.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you. Russ, really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's always fun.
Thanks so much.